Welcome to Full Focus. I'm Gloria Penner. San Diego's famous beaches are beckoning as summer approaches. Residents and visitors are staking out their spots on the sand. But the competition for beach access among homeowners, developers, and the public also heats up along with the season's temperatures. Tonight we talk about who has the right and the power to prevail. But first, KPBS reporter Rebecca Tolan reports about a proposal to build a large oceanfront hotel in Pacific Beach that is stirring up controversy. If it's approved, the $35 million Pacific Beachfront Resort would be one of the largest developments on the PB coastline. Landowner Michael Katz wants to build a hotel and timeshares in a 244-unit resort. The project would cover a block and a half behind the promenade at Mission Boulevard and Pacific Beach Drive. It would replace existing homes, shops, beachside stands, and restaurants dotting the boardwalk. But the Pacific Beach Community Planning Committee has serious concerns about the project. Chairman Mark Mitchell says it would wall off the boardwalk from beachgoers.
Probably a half a dozen to a dozen little businesses out here on the beachfront that interact with the beachgoers, which really helps the character of this area. You can get ice cream, you can get boogie boards, you can get chairs, you can get sunglasses, t-shirts, all this stuff right here. And the proposed project doesn't have any of those assets to it. It's in violation with the zoning code as well. It's not complying with the zoning code that requires this commercial frontage on either the boardwalk or Reed Street.
The Pacific Beachfront Resort would also shorten Reed Avenue to create a small public park. Critics say that would eliminate valuable parking spots. A spokesperson from the property owner, Steve Matchey, says the resort will not limit public access in any way. The San Diego City Council has yet to vote on the project. Pacific Beach is just one community fired up over its beachfront access. In Solana Beach, hostilities surfaced over luxury homes perched on the cliff's bluffs in Point Loma. Beach access at Sunset Cliffs Natural Park was shut down when the only stairway to the sand deteriorated. And in cash-strapped Del Mar, officials are searching for funds to support beach access and amenities for 2.5 million annual visitors. Are San Diego's beaches becoming San Diego's battleground? With me to talk about the threat and the promise of our waterfront are Doug Sheres, a member of the Solana Beach City Council who pays special attention to coastal issues, Michael Zucchet, San Diego City Councilman for District 2, which includes Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, parts of La Jolla, and the Point Loma Sunset Cliffs area, and Ronilee Clark,
Hi.
District Superintendent for the San Diego Coast District of the California State Parks, with responsibility for Borderfield State Park, the Silver Strand, and all state parks, coastlands up to Oceanside. Welcome to all of you. I'm delighted you could be with me. Let me start with you, Ronnie. We started the program talking about competition for the beaches coming from the public, from developers, from homeowners. How do you see this manifesting itself in your jurisdiction? Do you see that competition?
We really don't have very many issues regarding competition at this point because so much of the coastline within my jurisdiction is already built out. We do review projects that are proposed adjacent to our parks and look at the potential impacts to recreational use proposed or resulting from those, as well as impacts to resource protection.
Well, what about priority given to environmental concerns, for example, or conservation efforts when they arise and they compete with public recreation and with private interests?
Well, and that is a good question because it's a very tough balance when you look at providing the best recreational opportunities for people and protecting resources, and certainly that is our dual mission with California State Parks, and you do have to balance it. We have to look at each issue and each project individually. Each park is also slightly different. We'll look at access and development differently at, say, a place like Silver Strand than we might at a place like Torrey Pines State Reserve.
Explain that.
Well, Torrey Pines State Reserve is granted our highest level of protection in a state park. It's an area that is really set aside to preserve the very special Torrey pines and the bluff features in that park. And therefore, anything that we propose within the park or that is proposed adjacent to the park is going to be looked at with more sensitivity for the protection of that prime resource.
And, excuse me, and that's a decision of the state of California?
Well, projects that are proposed adjacent to our parks are going to be permitted by a local jurisdiction. But
like Solana Beach.
Like Solana Beach or another jurisdiction. However, most of those also have to go through Coastal Commission permitting. Now, that can be through the commission, or it could also be through a local coastal program that is the responsibility of a local entity, like the city, again, of Solana Beach.
Okay, so it's not hard and firm. It either goes through the city that's involved or it starts with the Coastal Commission. Ronnie mentioned the bluffs, Doug, right. And we know, for example, that in Solana Beach, residents are trying to protect their properties by building seawalls and these properties are on the bluffs, right? So do they have a right to do this, even if those seawalls, I assume, would prohibit public access?
Well, this is a battle that's been going on before my time, and I'm sure will be after I'm there, but the Coastal Act allows seawalls in the case of an emergency without any exemption, effectively.
What's an emergency?
A home that is in imminent danger. The language in the Coastal Act is that they shall be allowed to build a seawall when a home is in imminent danger. So those words have been fought out in court as well, but effectively in any emergency a seawall goes in regardless of...
I mean, as a house is sliding down the bluff, you can put up a seawall.
Effectively just before the house. If an engineer and a third-party engineer and so on certify that the house is about to fall, you can put up a seawall without any problems.
Even if this blocks the public's ability to access the beach?
Yes, and the questions that people raise are, A, when the walls are being built, the beach is covered with equipment and bulldozers and so on, which blocks beach access, as well as the argument that seawalls contribute to erosion of the beach, and to the extent that they are causing problems with retaining sand, does that eventually cause a loss of beach access if you lose your beach?
All right, so how do the rights of private homeowners conflict with the public rights in this case?
Well, they do conflict. The science is debated hotly whether or not seawalls do contribute to erosion. The science seems to indicate that they do. And so then the question becomes, well, if you allow walls across the entire cliff face in Solana Beach and you ultimately lose your beach, are you then interfering with the public's use of the beach? That's an argument that is put forward.
All right, then who makes the decision?
Well, the local jurisdiction has control, but the Coastal Commission also is a permitting authority. We try to follow the Coastal Act, which the Coastal Commission enforces. The Coastal Act stipulates that new construction shall not be allowed a seawall in the future, but it also says in the case of an emergency you can build a seawall. So the Coastal Act conflicts with itself, and it's very hard. We've gone through the past year and a half, we've spent trying to revise a new ordinance to try to deal with the conflict in the Coastal Act because it's creating problems.
Well, you know, the coast is a very sensitive place. Michael, you certainly are aware of that. As you saw in the video, the Pacific Beachfront Resort has raised the issue of public access to the beach versus development rights. Well, what's going on there?
Well, it's interesting, that specific project, before I was elected, I served on the Pacific Beach Community Planning Committee, and when I was serving on that committee back in 1999, this project first came to us. So this has been debated for at least 5 years in the Pacific Beach community. The developer seems to be pushing it a little more recently. But it's a fairly classic debate where you've got a private property owner who wants to develop his or her property to the maximum allowable, or maybe even push the envelope a little bit. The local community is, first of all, naturally resistant to change in the first place, but near the coast they're especially sensitive to such changes. And like in the cases you've discussed with Ronnie and Doug, it's sort of a dual jurisdiction. Both the local jurisdiction, in this case the City of San Diego, and the Coastal Commission has to give blessing on projects like these. And in this case, both the City and the Coastal Commission does have some serious concerns.
I could sort of want to broaden the discussion out a little bit, and I'd like you all to kind of respond to this. Along the San Diego coast, we'll start with you, Michael. There are other private waterfront developments. They may not be in your district, but we're all aware of them, such as the Hotel Del Coronado, the La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club, and even private homes that open up onto the sand. Now, to what extent can public access be restricted when you have those kind of private enterprises involved and right up there on the sand?
Well, as Doug said, both the local jurisdiction and the Coast Commission are guided by the Coastal Act in this question. The Coastal Act is not is up for interpretation depending on how good your attorney is and depending on what the issues are. But in general, the Coastal Act requires public access to what is a public resource, the beach. Private property owners and developers try and push that envelope to define public access in different ways, and the debate becomes very case-specific. It's hard to talk about generally because depending on the project, the issues are different. Sometimes it's parking, sometimes it's access, sometimes it's view corridor as opposed to actual access.
And this is like trying to fight City Hall? I mean, is it... If somebody really feels as though their rights are being interfered with as a member of the public, is it the Coastal Commission that they go to in order to interpret what the Coastal Act says?
Well, there's certainly precedent for that. There was a recent case in Northern California where a group of landowners petitioned to close the beach off to the public completely. And there was a lawsuit challenging that. And in the end, the homeowners won. They own the beach down to the mean high tide line.
What is that? What is the mean high tide line?
The mean high tide line is the point at which, in an average tide sequence, the water will come up the beach. So there are places in San Diego County where that's true as well. Local homeowners own to the mean high tide line. Below mean high tide or west of mean high tide is State Lands Commission land, and so that again gets into state ownership, and it's land that is accessible to the people of California. So on a high tide, even in those areas where there's restricted access, the public can freely move.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, but that is an even grayer area when you talk about State Lands Commission and the property line, because the property line is measured over, it's a 30-year mean high tide line. And no one is really measuring the high tide every year in front of these homes to determine where the property line is. And clearly the ocean's moving in, so that property line is changing every day, in some minute amount, but over a number of years it changes significantly, particularly in Solana Beach where the bluffs are eroding quickly. But who's there measuring, to come up with a 30-year database of where the mean high tide line has gone to come up with an average to determine where the property line is? People really don't know.
So who should be responsible for measuring it if it's in the coastal law? Should it be the state of California?
Well, in the ordinance that we are revising, it has never really been addressed in Solana Beach, but we're now discussing requiring homeowners who build seawalls to start measuring that. Of course, they don't want to do that, but it's not too clear where that will pan out at this point, but we're working on that.
Isn't that the fox guarding the hen house to have the homeowners measuring their own?
Well,
their own mean high tide line, or whatever it's called.
It's actually a survey. It's as if you were to build a new home or to remodel your home. You've got to go out and survey your property line to determine your setbacks and so on and so forth. And that's fairly standard for a homeowner to do that. It's done by a surveyor with a license, and that's. It's not as hazardous as it sounds.
So then, going back to you, Ronnie, so how protected is public access by the state of California? I mean, you just cited a case where the homeowners got the beach, except for the part, that's at low tide, I guess.
Well, there are a lot of places in the state of California where the beach is open. But there are those restrictions, and those restrictions will probably continue to be challenged in court, and the public will probably lose most of them and may win some. But again, below that mean high tide line, which I agree with you, is very hard to define, but it is a data point, if you will. Below the mean high tide line, the public has free access.
But the tide has to be out for the public to be able to walk
Absolutely.
along the beach.
Absolutely.
I mean, at high tide, you'd be underwater, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just want to be sure I know what I'm talking about here. Michael, in Pacific Beach, the Coastal Commission staff is concerned about the proposed timeshare units that are being proposed for that resort that we were talking about, reducing public access to the beach. Now, what kind of public access does the Commission require, as far as you know? Direct access to the sand and water going through private property, or just around or in front of the private property?
All of the above, depending on the project. Sometimes it's physical access, sometimes it's visual access. They don't like to block people's views of the beaches, even if they don't have direct access. And in the case you cite, they are even getting involved in the type of use. They view a timeshare as being less open to the public than, say, just a normal hotel room, which can be rented by anybody, whereas a timeshare usually has to have some sort of membership rights before you can even rent what's on the private property. So their view of public access is very broad and gets into all of these issues.
So that's interesting. So a timeshare is considered to be more private than
Correct.
a hotel.
In the Coastal Commission's view, that's correct.
Right. You don't have any issues like that in Solana Beach, do you?
Well, we do, and that a lot of the homes on the beach and the condos, particularly on the bluffs, are rented out. And the Coastal Commission weighs in on whether or not you can even get into whether or not you can charge TOT, because it's seen as an impact on people who come who want to rent a property on the beach and whether or not they can afford it. They go further, as Michael was saying, they get into all sorts of things. We've got an issue right now. We're trying to turn Fletcher Cove as our main public beach. It's essentially a large parking lot. We were trying to, in kind of a master plan, turn that into a park, which you would think will encourage more people to come and use the area. So we would argue it's a good use and increases access. We bought a parking lot across the street 10 years ago, I believe, to take the parking from Fletcher Cove and put it across the street. What's happened is other folks have started using the parking lot over the 10 years, and now the Coastal Commission is trying. This is all quietly happening. This isn't in a permit yet, but the Coastal Commission is saying,
well,
we're
it's
not.
Public knowledge as of this moment, Doug.
It's public, but it hasn't been heard at a council meeting yet. But the Coastal Commission is telling us, well, we may not let you use that parking lot as new parking for the parking you're going to get rid of in Fletcher Cove, even though you bought the property effectively for that purpose.
Interesting.
And we're arguing, well, hey, we're building a park, so we're going to encourage people to come to the beach, and we've replaced the parking, and they may or may not allow it. So,
well, you know, the California Coastal Act states that the state's goal for the coastal zone is to maximize public access and recreation consistent with constitutionally protected rights of private property owners. And that's the interesting part there. So what does this mean for the property owners?
and well, in terms of I think as that reads, it's really intended to protect that we protect the public property in line with the way private property owners would protect their own property.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Ronnie?
Well, and I think it means that the Coastal Commission doesn't have the regulatory authority to impinge on private property rights as far as access goes.
All right. Right. So Michael, are decisions regarding beach access the business of the state or the individual cities bordering the oceanfront?
They are both. Which one is more appropriate, I suppose, is up for debate. But I think the system works well as it is. The city is often very interested in parking requirements, whether a hotel or some other development is properly parked. Other sorts of more local issues. The Coastal Commission is interested in these broader notions of public access that we've been talking about. So it's sort of a 1-2 punch, and I think that's the appropriate thing to do. But either the Coastal Commission, either the state, or the local agency, in this case the City of San Diego, can effectively kill a project.
And what happens if there's a dispute between the city, the coastal city, whether it be the City of San Diego or Solana Beach or Imperial Beach, and the Coastal Commission on what the decision should be?
Well,
who wins?
Yeah, it depends. Usually it doesn't come to that. Usually the staffs of both of the agencies, and for instance in the City of San Diego's case, we have a San Diego City Council member who sits on the California Coastal Commission. That would be Scott Peters. So usually things can be worked out, but to the extent there is a dispute and a knockdown, drag-out, as I said, either agency can kill the project. So if somebody wants, both parties have veto power, is the short answer to your question.
Oh, they do? Oh, both have veto power?
Effectively, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. And so in the case, for example, of the Pacific Beachfront Resort, the San Diego City Council will decide if it will proceed. Now, if the Coastal Commission objects to the timeshares, can the Coastal Commission overrule the City Council approval?
Yes, they can, and there's a short track record of this, even in my time on the council, with some issues like, for instance, SeaWorld, which certain developments at SeaWorld were passed by the previous City Council. The Coastal Commission didn't quite have the same view and made some changes, and the City Council was required to either go along with those changes or start over.
Okay, Ronnie?
And I think that is an important point that Michael makes, is typically when the Coastal Commission offers a decision, they also offer conditions under which you could amend your project proposal such that it would be consistent with the Coastal Act. So it really is a give and take. And again, as Michael said, typically the staff of the two agencies work well together initially, so we can move a project forward without having to, come to loggerheads. But
that does happen occasionally, doesn't it?
It does happen occasionally.
I mean, we don't want to paint it as such a beautiful Pollyanna picture that people won't believe what we're saying.
It does come to loggerheads from agency to agency, and then there can be, very serious concerns expressed by the public. There's always an opportunity for the public to challenge those decisions, whether it's a City Council approval or a Coastal Commission approval, another jurisdiction approving a project through the CEQA process. The public always has the opportunity to challenge that.
And is the public heard and listened to?
Very much so. And the public is also very aware and very sophisticated. And I have always been impressed with the people that call me and ask questions about the projects that State Parks is proposing, and just how much knowledge they have about the process and about our proposals.
We only have a few minutes left. I want to give another example, Doug. Long Point Lomas Sunset Cliffs. Residents don't want any additional beach access stairways. The one stairway that leads down to the surfing beach is closed because it's in a bad state of repair and it was dangerous. So here are all these residents who say, no, we don't want a stairway there. We just don't want surfers sort of treading over our property. How powerful is that NIMBY effect when among residents when it comes to beach access? I mean, can they really exercise, the public power that Ronnie was talking about?
Well, absolutely, and hence the veto power that both agencies have, the local and the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission should keep check on the local agency when the NIMBY effect becomes too strong. In Solana Beach, an example, we have 4 coastal access points, and we actually have a 5th, which is closed off because it's become overgrown and hasn't been kept up. And the people in the neighborhood, a lot of them like it that way because they don't want the surfers and all the folks to come and use that. You couldn't actually get to the beach, but it's a lookout point. It's in between 2 homes, and they don't want people coming and using that. But technically, that is a public access way, and it should be open.
Well, what do you think, Michael? Should those who live in the beach area have the power to reduce or discourage beach visitors so that the residents' lives are not disrupted by noise or other nuisances?
Well, given that I represent most of the beaches in the city of San Diego, this is a big part of my job, is sort of playing referee among those who live in the beach area, who think of it as a regional resource, who understand that they live in a place where a lot of other people want to come, and they take it as sort of part of the territory. And on the other side, those who believe that because they live near the beach, they would like the beach sort of to be their own private playground. And it's oftentimes playing referee among those issues, whether it's people versus seals, or alcohol versus no alcohol, or what hours the fire rings, you get to use the fire rings in San Diego. There's a lot of issues like that. It often comes down to balancing the needs of the people who are right on the beach and are sometimes affected by the extra noise.
Not an easy job, I'm sure. In the 10 seconds we have left, Ronnie, I'm going to give you the last word. Where is the power when there are conflicts between the public and the private interests?
Well, certainly it's our responsibility as public servants to listen to the public. We have the final decision-making authority and responsibility.
Okay, well, I thank you all. Ronnie, it was great seeing you again, and Michael.
You too.
Doug, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this encore edition of Full Focus. For more information on beach access in San Diego, log on to our website at kpbs.org. And we enjoy hearing from you. Write to us at the address on the screen. Tune in again tomorrow night for the latest KPBS Competitive Edge research poll. We'll discuss some interesting findings on how San Diegans feel about the role of religion in politics. For KPBS, I'm Gloria Penner. Good night.